Thank you so much for coming today.
Perpetua.
All right, now let's take a look at this. I mean, seeing that particular report, what was the first thing that came to your mind? Is it something that we are ready for here in Nigeria to say, you know what, we want to stop or want to ban importation of solar panels?
So the straight answer is no in terms of ready. So let's backtrack.
Okay.
We currently generate in terms of generated capacity for power, probably about 11,000. What it does mean is that what we now transmit in terms of distribution is around levels of 5,000 megawatts. The aim is that by 2020, we want to get to a portfolio where 30%.
2020?
2030.
Okay.
We want to get to a percentage where 30% of our power generation is from renewables, and in this time, solar. So if we did a straight math and said that if we had 10,000, 10% of 10,000 is 1,000. So if we have 30%, that's 3,000 megawatts. Our total installed generative capacity today, when it comes to renewable energy, and I'm talking solar, is about 387,400. So the gap is still wide. Now, while the government might be thinking about it, the time is not yet right. Some months back, what happened is that you found out there were some tax waivers and incentives on solar products. The aim of this was so that people could bring it in at cheaper prices, and then we could scale. So home inverter systems, solar street lights, everything that has to do with a panel. And just for our viewers to understand, when you have panels, what you're trying to do is take direct sunlight from the sun into the panel, so it stores into batteries. Now that said, if we want to stop importation, then it will have a massive adverse effect on growth in terms of renewable energy.
Why is that so?
Now, so the point is this. When you start local manufacturing of anything, the aim ideally is that, okay, we want to encourage production. So it must start at a stage where 60 to 70% of that capacity has been built. So if you're going to manufacture these things locally, what is the stage today in terms of manufacturing? As we speak today, there are probably just, I believe, one company that is fully manufacturing here. That's a company called LPV. There's another company called Oxano who does what you call CKD, completely knocked down. So what it is that they put the parts together. So to manufacture a panel here, the two major items are glass and aluminium. Now, what now happens is that to be able to do it 100% here, you'll find out that a company that is even manufacturing here is probably importing those two items. Because if you backward integrate in Nigeria, what it is that, and let's go the battery route. The major components of batteries are lithium. Now, while we have lithium here, we've not been able to extract it in commercial quantity, standardize it. And when I say standardizing, so that when it goes through the production process, quality is at the highest. Until those stages happen, a ban is not even an option. What we should do at this stage, if you ask me, is that we should try and find more incentives to give in terms of more tax waivers, energy power cuts in terms of, because they're going to produce with power. If we give them incentives that makes them better to be able to produce, friendlier environments for them, then what it means is that it can begin to scale. But there should be no talk about a ban until local production or manufacturing has gotten to at least 70%. Let's not forget, when we talk about energy poverty, we're not nearly there as a country. Ideally, Nigeria should be using about 20,000 megawatts of electricity based on our size and industrialization. If we're just generating about 11,000, and only
that's installed capacity.
Yes, that's installed in terms of generation, 11,000. But we're only distributing 5,000. Then I don't think it's the right time to be having this kind of conversations.
All right. So, I mean, looking at all of these things now, what do you think we need to start from?
I think starting is what we started doing. You have companies that are now willing to set up in Nigeria and start manufacturing. Massive, massive step. And you see, for me, it takes not just guts, but they have gotten to the stage where they've taken the bulls by the horn. So they need to be encouraged. But encouraging them is not stopping importation of what the whole country needs.
You know, I mean, I remember you mentioned one company earlier, and I remember that during the launch of one of the maybe production sites, they also were asking the government to ban importation.
You see, and I always wonder why this happens. If we look around Nigeria, in terms of stop on importation for so many things, to try and increase local capacity, I'm struggling to think of one major thing that has worked. We start these things in a rush, in my opinion. Now, if that company is asking for that, what that company seems to want to do is that, yes, we can fill the market. But with all due respect to that company, you're going to grow in stages. You're going to, first and foremost, be able to supply where you are. They're based in Lagos. As it is now, I doubt very much if they can meet all the orders for Lagos. I might be wrong. But you focus on Lagos, Southwest, and then Nigeria. Once you can meet Nigeria, then it now means that your overhand begins to go into West African countries before you go global. If we ask that company what they thought the size of the market is and what they're playing now, it will be interesting to get their feedback. Because if you've not taken 50 to 60% off the market, then we still need imports. Perpetual, again, is important I say this. We need more imports now. Quality controls are what we must chase, so that the panels that are coming in are not substandard. You don't want Nigeria as a dumping ground. So organizations like Standard Organizations of Nigeria must continue to do what they're doing. But you do not stop imports until local capacity is at least, in my opinion, 70%. Even then when that happens, why stop it? I mean, Nigeria needs to decide, do we want a free market or don't we want a free market? If we want a free market, then we must continue to drive competition. We must continue to encourage competition. We must encourage people to come into Nigeria. Maybe the focus will now change. Instead of importing panels, begin to bring in companies that are coming into Nigeria with investment to come and set up some plants where we can manufacture. But the biggest issue is still how we backward integrate. Can we take lithium from Nasarawa in commercial quantities? Can we standardize it and make sure it's enough in terms of raw material feed?
So what are the issues, what are the constraints to achieving what you just said about the lithium?
It's two things. There's, when you manufacture things, there's some skill level that you have to build.
That's for the lithium?
For anything. Okay. So we're using lithium. So if you take lithium and batteries, lithium and cobalt are very key ingredients in making batteries. So it means that you must have that skill set. Go back to how Nigeria used to be a manufacturing hub. You had batteries like Berek. Those were old batteries like Berek, but they were manufacturing here. So what happened is that at a time, skills on extraction, when we all found oil, we looked away from some of those things. So the major issues are, it's a skill. We, as a company I am partnered with, and we make lights, solar lights. We're unable to make those lights in Nigeria, but we're able to make it in Asia.
Right.
Back to what I'm saying, skill. And then you see, when you backward integrate, you find out that, and this is the irony.
So how do we, institutionalize this backward integration? So it's not just investors that are driving it, but we have maybe some policies driving it.
That's a very great question. Now, policy consistency seems to be our major issue. We talked about a policy that said that we were going to give waivers to people who were importing panels, batteries, inverters. And why were we doing that? Because we wanted to scale. Now, a few local companies are now manufacturing. We've jettisoned that policy. So it's policy consistency. If you draw a plan and say that, where do we want to go? Nigeria by 2030, again I say, wants to be doing 30% of our energy mix from solar. This doesn't aid that. What it does is that it takes it back. So what is the answer to your question? It's policy consistency. If we draw up a policy that says that we want to go from A to C, Perpetual, we shouldn't be changing those policies until we are closer to C at an earlier period than we thought we should be. If we now look at it and back to standardization, if you get lithium from the ground, as it is, there's no technical capacity right now in Nigeria to produce batteries. So we have to ship that skill out of the country by shipping the raw material, which has been Africa's greatest problem. We take out all our raw materials and we bring it in. So back to what we're saying. You need policy consistency, but you need companies that are coming in. While a local company is partnering with someone who has the technology, that's good. But also bring in some foreign companies and say, look, this is very clear. You can extract lithium, but the plant has to be on ground here. The manufacturing has to be. So what happens? Knowledge transfer. So
what about okay, go ahead.
Standardization. When you standardize, something as simple as if I took something out from the earth and I wanted to use it in its clean form as raw material, It means that it must be free of particles, impurities, and that's that process of standardization. If you have too much sand in what you're going to spend so much time extracting the sand, which is another process on its own. So you mean that it means that the end product has a problem. Glass, aluminium. I mean, we had an aluminium company, Ascon. It hasn't worked in years. I'm not so sure it can still work at maximum capacity. So sadly, we've lost some ground. And to gain those grounds, we must begin to bring in people who are going to pass that knowledge on to us. But we must also be consistent in our policies.
Right. You know, what I hear, really, apart from every other thing you've talked about, I also hear trade policy, something we need to be very serious about, you know, bringing in this foreign direct investors and saying that, you know what, we need some capacity in-house. We need some capacity here. We need some things to be done here. We don't have to ship everything, because if we are going to do backward integration, we need those technical know-how that, you know, those are missing here.
They are missing, and you see...
In less than 30 seconds.
Very good. What I was just going to say, I think the person in the driving seat now, there's a Dr. Jumoke Oduwole. I think that we've gotten it right in terms of putting the right person ahead of this kind of conversation. And I think she will do us much, much good.
All right. Thank you so much for your time on the show today.